And today they're going to walk us through this BMI measurements in schools topic. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Sue and Ann. Some housekeeping. We're going to keep everyone on mute throughout the presentation to keep our sound in check for the recording aspect. This webinar will be available afterwards for repeat listening. If you have a question, please use the question bar in your webinar menu, and by the end of the webinar, Sue and Ann will have addressed all of those questions and will talk with you as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Sue and Ann and thank them for bringing us this great information today.
Thank you, Britt. Thanks, Britt. We want to thank everyone for taking time out of their day, because the days are so busy, to be at this webinar with us. Our goals today, our objective today is to raise the awareness of the harm to students caused by weight-based interventions, and that's what we see at schools right now using the BMI. And we would like to introduce some health-based interventions and resources. There are actually curriculums out there that are evidence-based that bring health-based interventions instead of weight-based interventions. It's important that we know the history of the BMI. Oftentimes, as professionals, as we're going through school, we just assume that the things that we use have been vetted out and are evidence-based. But if we need to look a little bit about the history of the BMI, it was actually created in the 1850s by a mathematician and astronomer and statistician, Lambert Quetelet. And he was fascinated with the idea of using statistics to draw conclusions about society. Those statistics that we see that Americans have 2.4 children, it was those broad-based things that he was interested in. And he explicitly said that the Quetelet Index, which it was known by, should not be used to indicate the level of a fatness in an individual. But in 1972, Dr. Ansel Keys, maybe because Quetelet was dead, decided to take the Quetelet Index, actually rename it the Body Mass Index, and use it as a way to measure body fat percentages. Again, so something that was never to be used for individuals, in 1972, Dr. Ansel Keys just totally tossed all that out the window. And as we like to say, the rest of that is history, because prior to that, we didn't look at the body mass index. Okay. And continuing to use the body mass index, in June of 1998, the National Institute of Health's Obesity Task Force lowered the normal from 27 to 25. And overnight, over 29 million Americans woke up fat. But the science showed that it should have been raised to 29, that they saw the lowest instances of death at a higher BMI. You can see that by this slide here. The lower instances of death are for BMIs between 25 and 35. So what happened when we look at evidence-based science, and this is where we all need to question things when they've just kind of been presented to us. But 7 of the 9 members on that task force were directors of weight loss clinics or had multiple financial relationships with private industries. Many of those private industries being pharmaceutical companies that have long been trying to make weight loss drugs and other forms of weight loss items. So the task force simply lowered the obesity standards to favor their bottom line, which again, when we know the history of it, that we actually use that is fairly remarkable. But then let's look at children, what we're seeing in schools. The first BMIs were used in schools in 2005. It is not something that's been done decades. It's something that recently started in 2005 in Arkansas. And we're going to see in a minute that the childhood BMI is based absolutely on arbitrary measures. And we should really look at growth charts as more of an assessment, which is something that should be done in a physician's office. Why a school is doing it with such limited resources, again, is cause for question. But when we look at a growth curve, we notice that bodies are normal at all sizes. A child that is born at the 90th percentile remains at the 90th percentile at 9 and 10 and 15 is perfect. They're following along that path that where their biological body was supposed to be. The child that's born at the 35th percentile and stays at the 35th percentile at age 5 and 10 and 15, they're perfect there. That is their biologically based body that they are supposed to have. Growth charts help us plot that, and we can see when discrepancies occur, that's when health concerns. When we see someone that has been at the 50th per weight and all of a sudden drops down to the 25th, that's a real concern. So a growth chart is a far better indicator because naturally, through nature and genetics, we have body sizes that range from thin to fat. And when we look at the body mass index, what they did for children, again, it was extremely arbitrary. They just picked numbers. In doing research for this in the late 70s, they said that obese would be 99.6, anybody over that percentile. We know it's been 50 years, almost 50 years, that we are getting taller and heavier. No different than we are larger than people born in the 1900s. And so in 2007, the category of overweight was the 95th percentile. And they changed it, they tripled it to be the 85th. Again, not based on any science whatsoever, very arbitrarily picked. And that's a real concern because, again, what we're led to believe is all evidence-based really isn't. So what is some of the aftermath we see of that? I'm not sure you saw this. It was in the news a while ago, but this nurse labeled this healthy 3-year-old obese, being based solely on the BMI. This kid is fat, according to New York standards. She was told she was overweight. And that's one of the problems that we see when we use BMI as a proxy for health. We have people that are actually very healthy that now are being labeled unhealthy or even that their body is a disease.
We really like this photo that's put out from the Association for Size Diversity and Health because childhood obesity, that term has been thrown around so much that you forget the faces behind that term. So we wanted to throw this in there to just kind of remind you about the faces behind the words childhood obesity. People want you to believe that there's an epidemic going on as far as obesity in children is concerned. According to the statistics, though, that's provided on the CDC's own website, there has actually not been an increase in obesity in 10 years. Far cry from what we hear in the media recently. They're wanting, they say, to prevent type 2 diabetes in children. That's kind of their underlying concern. And according to statistics, for every 100,000 children, there will be 12 incidents of type 2 diabetes. Not much of an epidemic. But if you compare that to 2,900 incidents of eating disorders per 100,000 children, and yet we have the treatment of eating disorders and the diagnosis of eating disorders to be quite rare compared to the media attention and publicity that the type 2 diabetes in children is receiving. So we're going to talk a little bit about the harm we are seeing with the use of BMI measurements in schools. and particularly focused on eating disorders. Over their lifetime, 20 million women and 10 million men will have been diagnosed with an eating disorder. Lots of great statistics here. 40 to 60% of elementary age girls are concerned about their weight. These are kids 6 to 12 years old, and they're talking about being fat. It talks about, too, 1/3 of teenage boys are using unhealthy weight control behaviors. They're talking about skipping meals, fasting, cigarettes, all types of purging behaviors. Interestingly enough, we also talked about the BMI of Miss America. Back in the 1920s, the BMI for a Miss America winner was around 22. We get to the 2000s, and that number has dropped to 16.9. It's frightening. The World Health Organization classifies normal, like Sue was saying earlier, as falling between 18.5 and 24.9. Again, arbitrary numbers. If you look on the right side, the diagram shows the number of individuals who are diagnosed with anorexia on the left, which is 1 in 200. But if you look on the right at the numbers for almost anorexic, you're seeing a higher frequency, 1 in 20. These are the individuals that are showing the same types of behaviors but don't meet the diagnostic criteria. And thankfully, the DSM-5 has had a change in categories this year that has hopefully addressed some of those individuals so that they can obtain treatment in spite of the fact that they haven't actually had the eating disorder diagnosis. We want to also mention that the eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness. So it's really disturbing to us that they don't receive the attention that they need as far as treatment is concerned.
So what can we do? It is important that we educate ourselves, other staff members, and it's also important that we advocate. We need to advocate for realistic expectations and education to our children. Things we're going to talk about now is we want to stop the stigma. We want health-based interventions. We want image diversity, collaboration, and personal modeling, and we'll discuss all of these. One of the things that a BMI chart does not take into consideration is growth. And we need to look at puberty. So in females, 50% of adult weight is gained during puberty, and the average weight gain is 38.5 pounds. We can tell we go from a lean body mass of 80 to 74%. Women need that increase in body fat. And the trajectory of our growth is women will get taller 6 to 9 months before, women will gain weight 6 to 9 months before growing taller. So you'll see a child putting on 20 to 40 pounds before they begin that growth. When we look at males, once again, 50% of our adult weight is gained in puberty. The average male will gain a little over 52 pounds. Males become much more lean, their body fat decreases, but males tend to have their height and weight at a much closer trajectory and growth. So it's much more pronounced in women. And we look at these stats and people shake their head yes and realize, yes, I know that's what happens in puberty, but let's see what that actually looks like. This is a picture of puberty. Mind you, it took me till I was over 50 years old to get up the guts to put these out, but that's me in 5th grade, 6th grade, and 7th grade. And I would like to think that, wow, it's very noticeable puberty in 6th grade. I have much more rounded cheeks. You can see I am much more full. By the time I get to 7th grade, I have a much longer neck. My face has narrowed out at that point. As I recall, no one said one word to me at this time. Not a teacher, not my doctor, no one. I was just allowed to grow normally. I live in the Iowa City School District. If this was me today, I would be sent home a letter of concern. And although we want to say, but they're not anything, it is a letter of concern, and kids know, oh my God, a fat letter went home and something's wrong with me. And so would I have started on a path of disordered eating? Would my parents have started on a path of having me follow disordered eating? And that is our biggest concern in the Eating Disorder Coalition of Iowa with the use of the BMI is it doesn't take into account puberty. Puberty starts anywhere from ages 8 to 18. And there is no type of test that says, wow, Sue's going through puberty in 6th grade, so let's throw out that weight. We are so obsessed with weight-based interventions that with what we're doing, is it causing much more damage? So there are programs available when things are like, but it just comes from the USD or what, and we're just geared that we have to have this BMI. There are other programs available. Healthy Bodies, Teaching Kids What They Need to Know by Kathy Cater is a comprehensive curriculum to address body image, eating, fitness, and weight concerns in today's challenging environment. It has lessons plans. It has been evidence-based documentation with it. It is a program that can be used in the different areas of the school. The model for the program is we look at conceptual building blocks which have a desired outcome and a goal. We begin to recognize and respect basic biology. We need to understand what is not in our control regarding size, shape, weight, and hunger. We all are going to be born with a biologically based place where we're supposed to be, where our weight is supposed to be along that growth curve. And we can no more change that weight than we can change our eye color or our height. So we need to begin to recognize what is not in our control. We need to accept the innate body. This is the body I have that I was born to have. We want to look at, again, the emphasis on what can be influenced or chosen. We want to have balance to the many aspects of identity or the many aspects of health. And we also want to promote and develop social and cultural resiliency. You know, we need to support, to have the children learn to support each other in resisting the unhealthy norms about weight, dieting, low nutrient foods, too sedentary a lifestyle. The outcomes, we want people to enjoy eating for health, energy, and hunger satisfaction. We want to create a physically active lifestyle for fitness, endurance, fun, relaxation, and stress relief. And we want to develop autonomy, self-esteem, confidence, and the ability to critically think. This curriculum starts with building blocks, and this curriculum, again, has lesson plans and things already in it. The schools that have used this have had great success with using health as a value instead of basing weight as a goal. As long as the BMI continues to be used, we use weight as a goal, and children learn to compare their bodies with others, and they don't learn to care for their own body. There are also other programs. NAFA has a childhood advocacy toolkit for educators to use. It can be downloaded from their website, and it looks like this. And again, it gives handouts and curriculums that can be used to show that we have that beautiful diversity of body sizes. If we go back to the growth curve, and all those body sizes are absolutely perfect. They're absolutely perfect, and we need to teach people to care for themselves regardless of where their biological weight is meant to be. So we want to work towards health as a value versus size as a goal. We want to teach integrity is valued over appearance, innate size diversity is accepted and affirmed, that internal hunger and weight regulation is trusted, and that our role models reflect a realistic standard based on deeper qualities versus solely external appearances.
One of the ways that we can do that, specifically those of us who work in this school, we have seen a trend toward mindfulness and teaching mindfulness in children. So along with teaching mindfulness as a whole, we can use that as a time to also teach the kids how to eat versus what to eat. Talking to them about distinguishing between, is my body hungry right now? If it is, what do I want to eat? How much do I need? And thinking about the need that they're actually trying to fill. Is it a hunger need, or is it an emotional need? Or is it something else? The other thing is to make sure that we're teaching them about the characteristics of food. As a parent myself, I know that we get in a hurry often and don't even take time to enjoy meals as a family or enjoy the food that we're eating. And so to teach kids about the fact that food can be enjoyed and what those characteristics are. Ellen Lofsky, and the citation is at the bottom there, provides a hunger and fullness scale. This would be a great visual for kids to understand the range that goes from hunger to fullness that you experience with food. It helps them to identify their initial hunger as well as what it feels like when they're full. It gives them a subjective rating system. It personalizes it so that the kids can get in touch with those inner signals in their bodies. Here's some of the characteristics of food I was talking about earlier. How often do we sit down and actually think about the flavor of the food that we're eating, the texture of the food, the color, the temperature? To be able to sit down and actually acknowledge those things and teach kids about the variety that they can experience, that there aren't good foods and bad foods, that there's such a variety and a balance that they need to find among all of these things.
When we talk about the body and trusting innately in it, I always talk about the nudge and the push. If we listen and if we don't take care of the need, the body sends a red flare. The body sends an absolute red flare. We can think of this, a real easy way to imagine this, which has happened to all of us, is going to the bathroom. We get a nudge that says, wow, I have to go to the bathroom. Good, I'm almost going to be home in 5 minutes, or where's the restroom? The body gives us a nudge that says a need needs to be met. That's our get ready time. And then we get a push. Wow, my bladder's really full. I feel pain from it. I need to take care of this situation. But if you're ever in a situation where you're driving and you don't want to exit the road because you don't want to take that time, and you know that the rest stop is going to be in 5 more miles, and you're like, I'm going for it. And in 3 miles you see that, oh my goodness gracious, the rest area is closed. Initially we're like, oh, but I really had to go. But if you pay attention to your body, in a couple miles we don't feel the pain of the bladder because the body doesn't like us to hurt, but we start thinking of that need. it becomes predominant. We think, oh my goodness, where's the next exit? Oh my goodness, do I have Kleenex in my glove compartment in case I have to pull over on the side of the road? That is in the forefront of our mind until we take care of that need. We can look at sleep the same way. We get a nudge that says, oh, kind of tired here. Get your jammies on, get home from the library, whatever you need to do. We need to go to bed and have rest and repair. My push when I am really tired, but I'm really reading a good book, is when I begin to blink. My eyes begin to, it feels like almost like they're burning. And that's my sign my body is saying, seriously, Sue, this book is going to be here in the morning, go to bed. And when I say, screw you, body, this is a great book. And I stay up reading until 1 in the morning, I still have to get up that next day. And what happens that next day is that red flare. It's like, oh, good God. Oh, if I had 10 minutes to lay down, I'd be good. Oh, if I could just lay my head 10 minutes. You know, that takes predominance in our brain. It is an innate need that hasn't been met. And when we want to teach kids, instead of teaching kids good food, bad food, you need this, you need that, to teach them the nudge, we get a nudge that says, wow, all these body parts have been working 24/7 and they need some fuel. Okay? Most people aren't aware of that nudge. That's when we want to teach them to learn those pangs, but they know the push, and a hungry body is a really anxious body. We get crabby, we might get lightheaded, we don't think as well, and especially in schools you can see this when a child doesn't eat. But we get that push, and a hungry body is a very anxious body. It gets loud, it growls, it does things that says, wow, I need to take care of this. And if we choose not to listen then because, wow, somebody told me I shouldn't eat this because that's not good, or this or that, we start thinking about food all the time. And that's no different than thinking about sleep and thinking about needing to go to the bathroom and thinking about thirst. Those are needs, that primary needs in the body that need to be met, and that's that big red flare. So if we have kids that are always telling us they're always thinking about food, they have not been eating enough food. And we also want to teach kids the nudge and the push of fullness. We get a nudge that says, check in. I think we're going to be done pretty soon, and because most people multitask now, when they eat, they don't recognize that, but they recognize the push. They recognize, oh my goodness, I'm stuffed. Our bodies are so sensitive that the red flare of we cannot do this anymore is very tight. And let me explain. Some of you may have seen this played out, oh, maybe a couple times with Thanksgiving last weekend. Be done with the Thanksgiving meal and someone says, oh my goodness, I am so stuffed, I can't eat another bite. And then their eyes look around and they look down the table and they say, oh, but please, that pie was so good, send me a sliver. And a sliver of pie comes down the table, and the person takes 2 bites of a sliver and says, oh my God, I'm going to get sick. I don't know why I did that. If we step back and think, what a remarkably sensitive body. It wasn't a whole pie, it wasn't a whole piece. It was 2 bites, and the body gave that red flare that said, we cannot do this. So these are the internal things that we need to be teaching our children, where, again, through BMI and good food, bad food, we keep teaching them all external cues instead of the internal cues, which are so sensitive. So we really want to look at health-based interventions. To stop weight stigma at schools, we actually need to stop teaching it. Wellness programs should be based on health and not weight, especially the BMI. Parameters at school, goals at schools should not be based on BMI. We need to teach children to care for their own bodies to appreciate their own bodies, to appreciate other bodies, and not compare their body to other bodies. And the weight-based programs teach comparing and not caring for bodies. And with eating disorders, we see this comparing oftentimes leading to competition, that if this is good, this size is good, this size will be better. And we see eating disorders develop, and we are seeing them at a much younger age.
So for those of us that are working in schools in particular, collaboration is key. There are many different aspects during the school day where we can touch on the topics of health and nutrition. And there are a lot of different players on that team, including the PE teacher, the FCS or Family and Consumer Science teachers, the science teacher. What better person to introduce the nudge and the push, the way Sue was describing it, the way that they need to recognize those cues that their biological body are trying to give them. The school counselor, obviously, the school nurse, the people who work on the food service. They're the ones that are, having to answer to those federal regulations for what calorie intake the kids need to have and what types of foods they need to have. Those are the kind of conversations that would be perfect for what we're talking about today. Coaches of all different kinds, for all different ages of kids. These are the ones that can be also harming kids if they're not giving them the right message about caring for their body and not comparing. And making sure that we are screening guest speakers. So when you have people coming in from the public to speak on the issues of health and nutrition, to make sure that they're sending messages that are consistent with what we want to teach kids. One of the things that I as a school counselor am pretty sensitive about is diversity, and that is one of the standards that we have to teach. So along with teaching cultural diversity and diversity in abilities and religious diversity and all of those other things, we need to also teach about body diversity. Talking to kids about thin privilege. What does that mean? What messages is society sending us? Teaching them to be literate consumers of the media, making sure that they're critical viewers of the media and understand, photoshopping and what they're seeing are not real bodies. These are bodies that have been changed by computers. For example, I have a great picture here. This comes from some photographs that a photographer did of 125 Olympic athletes. I think this is a phenomenal project that he did, and this is just one example of that. He has on the left a bodybuilder. The next two women are both weightlifters, and the last two women are gymnasts. And just to show this to kids that, even people that are in the same type of sport, the same type of competition, look at the diversity in their bodies. So that kids realize it is normal to have different shaped bodies, and it's okay to have different shaped bodies. Talking again about media literacy, 69% of elementary school girls are talking about the pictures in magazines influencing their self-concept. They're talking about almost 50% of them want to lose weight because of these pictures. It's scary. One of the primary resources that I like to use in the classroom is the Dove Campaign for Real Beauty. You can find some great videos online on YouTube. That campaign has started sending the message that all bodies are beautiful. One other thing that's really important for us as parents, for anyone really in a child's life, is to make sure that we're modeling what we want the children to learn. So making sure that we choose our words carefully, okay? Making sure that we're not talking negatively about our own bodies and critiquing our own bodies.
And I would like to add in here that we often see things that say no fat talk with an arrow through the fat, But we need to realize that there are thin bodies, moderate bodies, or neutral bodies, and there are fat bodies. And again, like that picture from that poster from ASDA, where we have the kids saying, when you talk about getting rid of childhood obesity, you talk about getting rid of us. A child, a teenager, an adult with a larger body or a fat body, when we see things about no fat talk, again, that's a very insidious way of saying your body is not acceptable also. So we want to stop all body negativity talk, not just say no fat talk.
In addition to that, we need to, like we mentioned earlier, remind kids that food is fuel for their bodies, that their body is a machine that requires that fuel, that there aren't good and bad foods.
That when we go back to the characteristics of foods, when we look at our tongue, oh my goodness gracious, this small tongue of ours has 10,000 food sensors on it that we call taste buds. And those taste buds, again, those 10,000 sensors are so intricately designed in the body to tell us that, wow, I feel like something sweet or salty or crunchy or cold. And our bodies will let us know if we rely on those 10,000 sensors. It is important kids know that their tongue isn't a calculator, it doesn't know grams, it doesn't know this, but their tongue knows the characteristics of food. And based on that, those 10,000 sensors, study after study shows that when we rely on innate wisdom, 80% of the time we eat very nutrient-dense food which fuels the body, and 20% of the time we have those fun entertainment foods because we eat for pleasure and we eat for social situations also.
So finding that balance is important. Promoting health at every size. Sue talked about Kathy Cater's curriculum. HAZE is the acronym for that. There's also ASDA, the Association for Size Diversity and Health. They have a wealth of information on their website. Eliminating focus on numbers when possible. That's kind of what Sue was talking about when she mentioned that our tongue is not a scale, it's not, measuring calories, that we need to not focus on those numbers. And that's particularly important in classes like FCS where, they're doing clothing and measurements and things like that to make sure that we're acknowledging that all sizes are acceptable and beautiful. Encouraging kids to have self-respect. That goes along with all the other things that we're teaching them about self-respect. So this is the perfect place to incorporate this as well. And then again, when we talk about exercise, that our bodies are made to move in a healthy way and to listen to those cues that she was talking about before too, about the nudge and the push. That is a perfect example of a way to hear your body when you're exercising and know when you're overdoing it.
So we want to educate and advocate in classroom and assembly presentations. And I would ask all the counselors to go back to their schools, and when we talk about that personal modeling, what graphics are shown in the school? Do the pictures represent bodies of all sizes, or are there only one size body? When, again, because budgets are tight and materials come in from outside organizations, what do they look? Do they show a diversity of body sizes, or is it just one body size out there? Resources, the Eating Disorder Coalition of Iowa, we encourage you, please use this as a resource. One of our missions is to get out there to educate. If you need us to come and speak, we work very hard at trying to get someone to do that. Community outreach and education.
So our website is on here, and all of our contact information is on our website, so feel free to visit that. We earned our nonprofit status, and our vision statement is an Iowa without eating disorders. And so as we talked about earlier with the increase in the number of eating disorder diagnoses and those people who fall in that category of almost anorexic or almost bulimic, those people need treatment just as much as anyone else. And the fact that we're worried about what's happening with our kids, especially with the BMI measurements happening in schools. As an eating disorder survivor myself, Sue talked about the BMI measurements not starting until 2005. I have to admit that I'm older than that, and so thankfully this did not happen in my school when I was young. However, the modeling that we talked about before, that did happen. And so, you know, teachers who had Slim Fast for lunch or started making those comments to me about my weight loss and how, you know, disciplined I was and things like that. And so to make sure that we're sending those messages to kids and being really careful about the kinds of conversations that we're having within their hearing, so that, you know, we just acknowledge that we are role models for kids and we want to make sure we're sending the right message. As an eating disorder survivor, I do come and speak as well, and am willing to tell my story, and we have lots of different representatives on our board. We have parents of children with eating disorders, both young children and adult children, and then a number of professionals, so therapists, dietitians, so anybody that you can think of as far as giving a perspective to this. We are here to help you in educating kids and educating your staff and educating your community.
Thank you for listening today. Are there any questions? Do you need to do that?
I don't show any questions have been submitted.
Okay, well, we would like to thank you all for listening today. And again, if you have any questions or need resources, we are here to assist you with that. So again, our website is edciowa.org. And our contact information is out on the website, both of our email addresses.
We have been told that this webinar will be available to listen at a later time.
So please, anyone that you know of who is not able to be in attendance today, please pass the information on to them as well, that they can find our webinar on the ICANN website, the ISCA website, and the EDCI website, and probably our social media as well. We'd like to thank ICANN for sponsoring this today. Britt Morey, we appreciate you introing us today and walking us through our first webinar. And thank you to all of our attendees.
Thank you.